Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So, for those of you who saw the post that I did in the group just earlier today, I wanted to do some follow up on some of the things that I put into that post. And specifically, I said there's three things that are crucial to recovering from SIBO and getting back to a place of health and well being. And, what inspired me to put this information into the group was really the conversation that I had this last week with Dr. C. Becker, where I really started to understand in a deeper level of detail everything that she had built into this SIBO Recovery Roadmap, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. But these three things that I feel are truly crucial to healing from SIBO and getting your life back to where you want it to be is one, taking a more holistic approach to healing. Two, following a data-driven and systematic treatment protocol. And three, creating the conditions that support healing of body and mind. So let's take the next 10 minutes and explore some of this in greater detail because I think this is going to be really helpful. I know that a number of you have also joined the SIBO SOS community on Facebook, and that's another wonderful resource. And this is the SIBO Recovery Protocol. I think it's also called the SIBO Recovery Roadmap. You can get it for free if you go to sibosos.com. You just put in your email address, and then you're able to download a copy of this. There's a lot on this sheet. And SIBO SOS is basically a program that will teach you all about every step that's included in this flowchart for SIBO recovery. And I want to take a couple of minutes to unpack some of the details in this for you today, because I think there's a lot of really important things here that are easy to overlook and easy to miss. So this one is a little bit busy. Like I said, you can get this for free from SIBO SOS, but I'm actually going to look at a different version of the same thing because it's got some more information on it. So in general, here it's called the Grandmaster SIBO algorithm or the SIBO Recovery Roadmap. It's all the same thing. It's a systematic approach to SIBO treatment. And regardless of the one that you're looking at, it starts with SIBO being suspected. And what I've heard from so many of you, and this was true for me as well, is that I dealt with SIBO symptoms for a number of years before getting clued into SIBO, that it was a whole thing, that you could do a breath test and find out if this is what was actually going on with you. I was talking to an individual earlier today who hasn't done a breath test but seems pretty convinced that they've got SIBO because when they eat high FODMAP foods, they suffer lots of bloating. When they eat low FODMAP, things seem to be better. So the flowchart starts with SIBO suspected, and then it moves down to first and second line therapies, which is a box that's really easy to just kind of look past because that doesn't mean anything, at face value. When you look at these charts, your eyes are drawn to SIBO treatment and taking antibiotics and what you do for diet, which is so much of what gets focused on in the groups. It's what so much, gets focused on when someone is organizing their own treatment program. So whether it's this roadmap or whether it's this roadmap, it's really easy, again, to just jump down to SIBO breath test, SIBO treatment, antibiotics. But I want to take a second to explore this box of first and second line therapies because it's really important. And I'll admit that looking at these flowcharts in the past, I didn't give this one a whole lot of thought. And it wasn't until actually signing up and downloading this recovery protocol and starting to get some of the follow-on emails from Siobhan, the woman who's behind this company, that I started to understand what was incorporated there. So, the very first email that you get is about the first and second line therapies. And it says, you might think that if you have symptoms of SIBO like IBS, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, food intolerances, the first thing that you should do is go get tested for SIBO. That's kind of conventional wisdom. But according to Dr. C. Becker, before you get tested for anything, you need to try the first and second line therapies. First line therapies are diet and lifestyle. This is what you eat, how you eat. Are you eating a lot of processed foods? Are you eating quickly? Are you not chewing well? Are you stressed out all of the time? Are you drinking 5 cups of coffee every morning? because all of these things and many more can contribute to the same symptoms as SIBO. Now, this speaks to something that I suspect, which is that chronic stress, when it really takes root in your life and it turns into anxiety and it starts to impact the functioning of your vagus nerve, there's a whole constellation of symptoms that come on as a result of that. And many of those symptoms, digestive challenges, concerns about irregular heartbeat and high blood pressure, racing pulse, like all of these things can overlap with some of the things that you experience when you have SIBO. So before even getting into a breath test, there's a call out that diet and lifestyle should be looked at and should be optimized before going down that path. The question for all of us is, have we done this? Or did we jump straight into the breath test? Or did we even skip the breath test and go straight into antibiotic treatment? The second line therapies are supplements that support digestion. Could be digestive enzymes, tonics, bitters, probiotics, and prebiotics. Adding in these supplements when you eat can make a significant difference for many people. You can find lots of information online. What do you do when the first and the second line therapies don't work? If changing your diet, learning to manage stress, and adding in digestive enzymes helped a little, but you still have SIBO symptoms, then we go back to the roadmap. And that's where we move into the SIBO breath test. So you can see that that's what's called out here. And I kind of wish that first and second line therapies was actually in a color that grabbed your eyes and screamed, pay attention to me, because it's so easy to jump over this. And if you've been listening to my content at all, you know that I believe that there is a big impact from stress. I believe that chronic stress increases susceptibility to having SIBO. And in fact, that's what Dr. Siebecker said, is that for so many people, there were a lot of things going on in their lives, but it wasn't until they went into a at least 2-week-long period of acute stress that the SIBO symptoms started to show up in their life. So it appears that stress has a role to play in the onset of SIBO. Many people have posted in the groups that when their stress is worse, right, whether it's family stress or work stress or health stress, that their symptoms seem to get worse. And the converse is true, that a lot of people report that on the weekends and when they're on vacation and when their stress load is lower in their life, their symptoms are better. And then I also believe that chronic stress gets in the way of true healing. Because again, chronic stress through the SIBO stress conundrum is going to impact the functioning of your vagus nerve, which is going to impact your motility and your digestion and a host of other things, and create the conditions that support overgrowth in the first place. So let's not forget about this box. That is my call to arms today, is to appreciate and to investigate the impact that diet and lifestyle and digestive support can have. So then if that doesn't work, then you move into the breath test. And the breath test, this initial one, is so important because it's going to direct the course of your treatment, right? Most GIs, like the one that I went to, are going to give you rifaximin. But depending on whether you're dealing with hydrogen, methane, hydrogen sulfide, or SIFO, right, there may need to be some other things that are in your antibiotic cocktail, which is what I like about this detailed one a little bit more, right? Rifaximin for diarrhea or mixed, rifaximin and neomycin or metronidazole for constipation, and optional for antifungals, right? And same thing for herbal antibiotics. Some of these are going to be more appropriate if you're dealing with constipation versus diarrhea. So what's going on in your body is important in terms of directing the products that you take for treatment, but that breath test is also very important. And now this flow chart here is a little bit different up here before we get into SIBO treatment. You'll see that in this one, it goes from first and second line therapies to the breath test to treatment, because this is really for the individual who's on the receiving end of treatment. This flowchart is a bit more for the practitioners, and let's take a minute just to talk about what's going on here. We've got the breath test, lactulose glucose breath test, potentially an IBS blood test. There's other things that a trained and qualified physician who's got experience with SIBO should do. They should be taking your medical history, looking at the onset, looking at other GI issues, other GI symptoms, other medications that you're on. This is also an opportunity to do some other diagnostic testing. So looking at your blood, looking at your stool, looking at celiac, looking at intestinal permeability, looking at food antigens and food sensitivities, right? Endoscopies and colonoscopies. So often I see in the groups that people are getting into doing these tests only after multiple rounds of antibiotics when they haven't had relief. And so it's almost like if I've done all of the antibiotics multiple times and I still have SIBO, it keeps coming back. Now I'm going to start my root cause rabbit hole search, and then I'm going to do a lot of these other diagnostic tests. Well, if we're following a systematic protocol, if you're working with a physician who's got a lot of experience in SIBO, a lot of this stuff should get done on the front end so that you can move into the treatment phase with the most data, with the most knowledge, and try to tackle all of these things at the same time. So then as we start to look at what the treatment phase looks like, right? 3 options plus diet. So you've got antibiotics, which are prescriptions, herbal antibiotics, so natural antibiotics, the elemental diet, which effectively starves the bacteria, and then you've got diet, which is ongoing to reduce the symptoms for you and reduce just the negative impact of feeding all of these bacteria and helping them to proliferate. So we get into now another one of the differences between trying to do this on your own and then working with a physician, because a physician is going to be familiar with all of the different options within each of these categories. And another thing that I gathered from Dr. Seebecker is that when you get into treatment, what you're really wanting to do is to push through in one big contiguous effort to get to the point where there is no more overgrowth. And this is likely, right? Likely to include multiple rounds of antibiotics. It may include shifting up the antibiotics depending on how well these are working for what's going on in your body. And it's really helpful to work with someone who can switch gears. So if you do, pharmaceutical antibiotics for 2 or 3 weeks and you get to the end and you're not better and you need to continue treatment, they know exactly how to switch over so that you don't lose time. You don't end up wasting days, weeks, and potentially months figuring out what your next course of antibiotics is, all the while allowing for the overgrowth to reestablish itself. So there's an efficiency that's gained when you work with a trained professional on doing this stuff. You get into prokinetics. Again, there are prescription prokinetics, and then there are some natural and herbal prokinetics, right? But this is important between the rounds. So then we get down to the bottom, and the flowcharts, regardless of the ones that you look at, are the same here. If you're better, if you're more than 90% better in terms of the symptoms, like boom, you did your antibiotics and it knocked things out and you're feeling almost completely better, you shift into the prevention phase. 3 months ongoing, focusing on diet, focusing on continuing to take your prokinetic, and then some other things that may help too. And you're looking to see whether you can sustain all of the benefits and move back into having good digestive health, which is ideal, or whether you relapse. And if you relapse, then you start a broader investigation into what else it could be going on and move back into the treatment phase. If you're not 90% better after a round of antibiotics and you're still dealing with food sensitivities or the brain fog or the bloating or all of the other things, the recommendation is to do another SIBO breath test within 2 weeks. And this is important because you want to see the efficacy of what you just did. Right? So if you tested positive, you did your antibiotics, you're not better, you want to be able to get some data to help to direct what you're going to do the next time around. And that's what this SIBO breath test does. And you can see that it's done in pretty close sequence with finishing up your antibiotic therapy. So again, going back to the DIY approach and what's oftentimes, probably a weakness or a limitation is that you do your antibiotic therapy and then you wait to see how things are. You might feel better for a couple of weeks and then things start to creep up. And you're wasting time, right? You're wasting time and potentially allowing that overgrowth to get reestablished. So based on that 2-week breath test, if it's negative, then again, you're looking at other reasons for continuing to feel bad and have symptoms. If it's positive, you go back and you retreat. So you can see that this portion of the flow chart is really the same regardless of the ones that we look at. And so, I'm hoping that this helps you to get a little bit more oriented in the grand scheme of things. And what I mean when I say a systematic protocol, that's not anything that I've developed. Dr. Seebecker and Siobhan Sarna have done a really good job of pushing this out there. And, when you're looking for physicians to work with, my personal recommendation would be to find a physician who's experienced in running through a protocol, this one or another one that's very similar. And if you can't find a physician that's willing to do that, to find someone who's at least willing to take the time to understand this and to follow this as a systematic protocol, because like we've just covered today, there's really important things buried in what you should be doing initially to see what sort of benefits you can get out of enzymes and what benefits you can get out of stress reduction and what benefits you can get out of mindfulness before eating, right? And it's really important to understand the role of the breath test. I know that some people say, well, I've read about it and it sounds like sometimes there's false positives or false negatives and it's not all that reliable. The better question to ask is like, okay, so what is the alternative? There are some other tests that are potentially more accurate, but they're also much more intrusive in terms of sampling from inside of your body. So, there is value in the breath test. And I think oftentimes the question is, how was it conducted? Not like, does the breath test work, but are you doing it with a physician that actually understands how to do it well and how to get you some robust data? And is it being used strategically to be able to continue to direct this effort? And the metaphor that I think is pretty apt in all of this, and I say this looking out my window here at our neighbors who still aren't in their house after a year after they had a fire in their dryer vent, but we all stood outside as the fire department came and tore up the floor and sprayed water in their house and did all these things. I envision this overgrowth in your small intestine as though it's a fire, right? And the goal is to put that fire out. And the antibiotics or the elemental diet, these efforts to starve and to kill the overgrowth are an effort to put this fire out. And what you're wanting to do, and what a good protocol like this is actually able to do for you, is to push you all the way through to the desired endpoint, which is no more fire, no more heat, right? And that's what they did in this house. Not only did they spray water everywhere, they continued to tear up floor until there was no more heat. And then they soaked everything in a huge foam. And, when they left that house, they wanted to be 100% certain that there was no more heat, no more embers, nothing else that was going to catch on fire. And so that's the same process here. You don't want to take some antibiotics, starve things down, get rid of the fire, but still have some burning embers, turn your attention to something else, and then have those start a fire again. You want to be able to work with someone and work with a protocol that's going to push you and push you and push you and take you all the way through until those embers are completely out. So this went a lot longer than I was expecting, but I hope that this has been helpful. Like, number one, in terms of introducing you to some of these resources that are out there if you haven't already looked at these. But then number two, talking a little bit about some of the nuance that exists in these schemes so that you can better understand how to use these as kind of your North Star to, and I don't want to say direct your own treatment, but to inform the types of people that you want to work with and set your expectations for the type of process that you should be taken through as a result of your treatment with whoever that professional is. So, circling back to what I had said in this post today, taking a more holistic approach to healing. We see that in the first and the second line therapies, there is a nod towards stress reduction, towards mindfulness, towards how you're eating. Following a data-driven and systematic treatment protocol, that's what we just explored in detail, right? And we explored and I explained some of the benefits of going with that protocol and some of the limitations of doing a DIY approach. And then lastly, creating the conditions that support healing of body and mind. This is really about stress reduction. This is really about making sure that you're not in a sympathetic dominant state where your fight and flight is always triggered, because again, that's going to impact the functioning of your vagus nerve. It's going to impact your gut motility and your digestion, and it's going to continue to create conditions where overgrowth can take root and proliferate. So with all that being said, if you've got any questions, please put those down below in the comments, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great day.